But let's move on to that final topic, and it's our favorite. It's my favorite time of the year. I don't know if it's your favorite. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if we were in agreement here. Favorite time of the year for both of us here on the Primetime Podcast. It's bracketology season. It's time talking on the bubble teams, who's going where, who's going to who. And right now, looking at Joe Lanardi's, that's the one that I like to use as the main just kind of segment. I mean, CBS has a great bracketology as well, but Joe Lanardi's really my guy because Joe Lanardi, I look at his bracket and he knows where to put him and he knows what the committee is thinking most times. And his number one seeds right now, North Carolina, Iowa, Oklahoma, Villanova. But we're not talking about number one seeds here, Brandon. We're going to be talking about the guys who are on the bubble. And we can talk about last four in, the last four buys. We're obviously going to be talking the final four out and then the next out. But I want to start with the last four in. And the four teams we've got, these are the play-in guys, where we have Syracuse, Seton Hall, Florida State, and Butler. And in the Midwest region, Joe Lanardi has one of those 11 seed play-in games being Syracuse and Seton Hall, and the other one in the South being Florida State versus Butler. So that's what that means. And the team I want to look at is Seton Hall because their team right now, let's be honest, we haven't talked about Seton Hall. We haven't really talked that much about the American unless it's the Villanova Hova. And right now, Seton Hall is 17-6, 7-4 in the conference. And to me, I look at their schedule, and there's only one knock I have. There's one knock. You can't beat the ranked teams. They've lost to Villanova no matter where they are. They almost beat Villanova at home, but they lost to Villanova both at home on the road. You lose to Xavier on the road. You do beat Providence on the road, so I will give you that. You got one ranked team, but really you're losing to most of your ranked teams, especially in the conference. And to me, you've got some key games coming up that you need to win. 2 against Butler, a team that's right there with you. Winner of those, whoever sweeps that series, if they do, is going to get an extra nod in the bracketology. Then you get Providence at home. You beat them on the road. Cool, you can try to beat them at home. And you get a top 5 Xavier team at home.
Yeah, I think that this Seton Hall team is an interesting one to watch, and they really just came on the radar for me today. Literally today. And Joe Lanardi has them projected right now as a number 11 seed. I think that, they're third in the Big East, right behind Xavier and Villanova, of course. But what I like to see is, you don't like to see the losses to the ranked teams, but I like to see that they've at least been somewhat close. They've not been blown out. They haven't lost by, I don't think, more than 9 points. So that's close enough. You talked about how they almost beat Villanova at home, but they lost by 1. It's been close games. That's what you want to see. 7-4 within the conference. I think that's respectable. But I do think that this stretch, very important. This game against Butler coming up on Wednesday, it's at home. You've got Butler at home right now. You can make a statement. You can show, we're not a team that's going to just stick around for a little bit and then, boom, gone. You can show that you're a team that's going to be there to stay. If you can beat Providence at home, huge. If you can beat Xavier at home, even bigger. So you've got a tough stretch, but an important one if you're Seton Hall, and it's huge.
Well, and to me, I'm looking at their non-conference wins right now, and to me, the best of their non-conference wins are, you got 3 of them. Georgia, Ole Miss, that was a neutral site game, and then Wichita State. And me just eyeballing it, it's like, okay, cool. Those are some good wins. Looking into it, though, the Georgia Ole Miss wins may not be, record-wise, I look at Georgia and Ole Miss's record, and I go, okay, those are 2 good wins. However, probably not super good, as Georgia's a next 4-out team, and Ole Miss right now nowhere near the bracket. However, that Wichita State win, That's a good win. And then the reason why I'm saying that is, yeah, they weren't ranked at the time. They weren't the Wichita State team that we saw last year. But right now, Wichita State is a 7 seed in Lanardi's bracket. So, boom, that's a nice win over a team that is right now in the tournament. Another good game is that Villanova game. You mentioned, they haven't lost by more than 9 points this season. Well, they only lost to Villanova at home by a single point. To me, that's just as good as beating Villanova, because I look at Villanova and Xavier at the time when they played them, where it was the 1 point loss. It was 4. Xavier was the 5th team in the nation, like they still are right now. No one's going to expect you to beat those teams. So as long as you keep it close, cool, okay, I can buy it. I can buy you. The only thing that Seton Hall has to do to make the tournament, they've got to beat Georgetown, St. John's, and DePaul. Those 3 games cannot lose. Those are your must-wins. You cannot lose.
And they've got to at least split with Butler.
You got to split with Butler. So you got to win those 3 games, at least split with Butler, and you have to take one against Providence or Xavier. You got to win one.
I agree. You've got to. That is what you have to do.
Otherwise, you got to make a deep run in the tournament in your conference tournament.
I was just going to say, if you had to lay out a strategic plan for Seton Hall,
show me a little bit of strategery, as George W. Bush would say. Strategerize for me, Brandon.
Absolutely. But that's exactly what you have to do. Those would be the keys. Mm-hmm. You have to look at it. Here's your checklist for you. You're going to the grocery store. You got to beat these teams. You got to at least split with this one. Get me one of those and got to get one of these. All right, ready, break.
Don't look at the candy bars. Those pack on the calories, Brandon.
But ultimately, that is what you've got to do.
And I mean, looking over another team, we talked about Seton Hall. Let's move over to Butler, because they're also right there in Joe Lanardi's last 4 in, with Butler right now 16-7, 5-6 in the American. So they're not so hot right now. Non-conference wins. I'm looking at them, Brandon. The biggest one that comes out to me, December 19th, a neutral court site. You beat number 9 Purdue. Good for you. You also beat number 17 Cincinnati on the road. Your only non-conference loss, you lost to a Miami, Florida team who wasn't ranked at the time. However, with how good the Hurricanes have been, that you can kind of say, okay, we'll let it slide because Miami has turned in to a good team. Conference play hasn't been that great, but when I look at their losses, the only bad losses you can say are maybe the Marquette, but Marquette's a 15-9 team. They're 4-7 in the conference, whereas you've got Creighton, who's 15-9, 6-5. So one below you, one above you. Maybe that Marquette win that's the worst of the two. But what you need if you're Butler to get in is same as Seton Hall. You got to split. You have to at least split. But for Butler, I'm going to go the extra mile. You got to sweep those 2 games because you're technically below Seton Hall. You got to sweep Seton Hall. You got to beat Creighton, Georgetown, and Marquette. Those are your 3 must-wins. So you got to get the must-win check. You got to, I'm going to say, sweep Seton Hall, and you have the harder test. You got to beat either Xavier at home or number 1 Villanova. Well, number 1 right now, Villanova. First time they've been number 1 in their team's history on the road February 20th.
And I think the worst loss for Butler, I think it's that loss against Xavier, because you didn't just lose. You lost by 18 points, or 19 points, rather. For Seton Hall, you lost on the road. You lost 84-76. You were right there.
Villanova was only a 1-point game, whereas the first time, it was a 5-point loss for Butler, but a 1-point loss a 1-point loss to the number 4 team looks a lot better than a 5-point loss to the number 11 team.
There's a lot on the line for both of these teams. Mm-hmm. There's more on the line for Butler.
Well, Butler has to do more in my mind to get in. When not only do they have to do more, like I said, they have to sweep Seton Hall in my mind. They got, I mean, if I'm looking, Xavier and Providence is easier than Xavier Villanova.
That's what I'm trying to say. There's more pressure on Butler.
Yeah, there's more pressure for them.
Both teams have to do well, but there is more pressure on Butler when you look at what's happened and what has to happen going forward.
Mm-hmm. I'll let you pick out of it because we'll look at all the last 4 in. You want to go up north to New York and look at Syracuse, or we're going down south to Tallahassee? Where do you want to go? Where are we going next, big guy?
Let's go ACC.
Both
and
of them
we'll
are
go
ACC.
to. We're gonna go. That's why I said let's go ACC. We're gonna go to Syracuse.
Let's go to Syracuse. So right now, 16-8, 6-5 in the ACC. They're currently riding a 3-game win streak. They got a ton of to me, the big wins, you beat 18 Connecticut, you beat 25 the Gig'em. I believe that's the catchphrase. Gig'em, is that right for the Aggies? Who cares? But they beat Texas A&M, they beat UConn. The big losses. You've got number 13 Miami of Florida, you got number 6 North Carolina, you got number 13 Virginia. However, the biggest one I'm circling with a huge pen, Brandon, you lose at St. John's. St. John's is a 17-loss team, has only won 7 games. They have not won a single game in conference. That's a huge one for Syracuse, and I don't know if UConn, Texas A&M, and Duke, and Notre Dame, their 4 ranked wins, are good enough to... I would have them as the first 4 out in my bracket.
For me, for Syracuse, I think possibly one of their biggest wins now, Notre Dame. You didn't beat Notre Dame.
Well, because Notre Dame...
You beat Notre Dame.
And Notre Dame just beat the number 2 team in the country in the Tar Heels.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. And the people who, are sports people, which is who we do this show for, would know that. But I think that that's probably their biggest win. And right now, they're riding a 3-game winning streak. And it's interesting because they'll be playing against Florida State coming up later this week.
Hey, they got Florida State twice, who's that other bubble team we talked about. But I'm going to ask you this. We talked about Louisville earlier in the podcast. If Syracuse, I know Louisville's ranked number 13 as of right now, but if Syracuse beats Louisville on the road, although there's a postseason ban, is that still a quality win for them moving forward into the tournament? Or do you think that the committee looks at that as, okay, they beat Louisville, was Louisville, and I know the game has to happen, but okay, was Louisville really playing that game because they don't have nothing to play for?
No, I don't think it hurts them. I don't think it hurts them at all. I mean, if Louisville's still ranked at that spot or around that spot, it'd be a great win for Syracuse.
And I hate to feel the same checkpoints that we've been looking at, but for each team it's been the same thing. For Syracuse, you've got Boston College, Pittsburgh, NC State. Those are your must-wins. You cannot lose any of those games. You either have to, in my mind, split the Florida State, and you got to beat Louisville or North Carolina. Got to win one of them.
I think
the same thing as we talked about with the other 2.
Tough game for Syracuse. Could be that Pitt game. That's what I'm looking at. I think that could be an interesting game. I think Pitt could give them a run. So that may be the toughest game down the stretch of the unranks. But then, of course, on the road at North Carolina right before you end the regular season at Florida State.
And to me, that Pitt game, out of the must-wins, that Pitt game is the most important because if we look at Florida State, the last of the last 4 ins that we looked at, Pitt beat the Seminoles by 2 points. So if Syracuse is able to beat Pittsburgh, they can then look and go, okay, well, you know what? The committee, you should look at this because we technically beat Pitt when this team lost to it. But looking at the schedule for Florida State, the big part of the schedule, yeah, you lose to Iowa when they weren't ranked, but they were ranked now. The biggest non-conference loss was that Hofstra loss that they had really early in the season. But it was so early enough to where they were able to come back from it, and they're in the position they are right now. To me, the big one was that game, 7-game stretch from January 2nd to the 23rd. Almost the entire month of January, where you went 2-5 in that 7-game stretch. And I mean, you played North Carolina, Miami, and Florida, and you lost to Louisville, but the Pitt and Clemson losses, that hurts. Yeah, Louisville and Virginia may cancel out and just say, okay, you got through that stretch. But if I'm looking at Florida State, they don't really have, I mean, Miami of Florida, that's their, like, you've got to win that game, even because that's your only ranked game, and you got to split Syracuse. The other ones, it's like, yeah, you beat Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, Duke, and Notre Dame, but it's like you don't have as many state, like, out of the four we talked about, this is the team that has the least of the, wow, that's a really good win.
If I'm looking at Florida State, what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the stretch coming up right now. You've got a tough game on the road at Syracuse. Then you play number 12 Miami. Then Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech. And then the last 3 games, they are not going to be easy. On the road at Duke, at home versus Notre Dame, and at home versus Syracuse. It's nice that you get to end those last 2 at home, but still, quality opponents to end the season. Well, folks, there you have it. Our last 4 in. And are we going to do our first 4 out? We are. We're going to have to check out the video on the YouTube page. We are doing that one video style. Yes, we are teasing you. Just like a freshman girl. So, folks, make sure you...
Just a little bit of a tease.
You got to check it. That's why I said freshman. You know, they ain't up to senior yet. They're not doing that. But, folks, make sure you check it out. Going to be a good video.
And that's going to do it for the Primetime Podcast here. It was a great podcast. Started off on that serious note, but we got to the bracketology in the end, and you guys can expect us to talk bracketology and bubble teams from now until we get to March Madness. I want to thank you guys for checking out this podcast. If you're listening on SoundCloud, hit that nice red heart. That's what hearts are colored. You can also hit that repost button, kind of looked like the retweet button on Twitter. If you're on YouTube, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. If you're new, hit the like button. If you're not, even if you are, go ahead, hit that like button. It helps us out. You can follow me on Twitter at Ricky Widmer. Brandon is at young_swan19. Most Valuable Podcast is at Most Valuable Pod. Thank you guys again for checking out this podcast. This is Ricky Widmer signing off for myself and Brandon Swanson. But as always, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this MVP podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Most Valuable Pod for more great podcasts.